Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Ways podcast. I am your host, Shel Fuller, aka The New Ways, and I am very happy to be speaking with our guest today, Daniel Garcia Murillo, who's an illustrator, originally from Mexico City, but currently lives in Berlin. I really had the pleasure of working with him. Together, he created the album cover for my latest EP entitled Karen, which he did a great illustration for, which is sort of reminiscent of Karen's being compared to the old King Kong imagery, as with King Kong on top of the entire Empire State Building. So it's a great piece of work, very detailed. I was very happy. The collaboration process was really wonderful and a very unique experience for me, and I really appreciate it. And luckily, a mutual friend of ours, brought us together, and it worked wonderfully. So it's a pleasure to talk with him today a little bit about his artistry, what he does, why he chooses what he does in terms of illustrating a lot of sort of like monsters and fantasy figures. And so without further ado, here's Daniel Garcia Murillo. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Daniel. How are you doing today?
Very good. Excited. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So I guess let's start off with a little bit of your background. So maybe so where you come from, sort of just a little bit of your origin story, so to say.
Yeah. Well, I come from Mexico. I was born in a city called Monterrey, that is like in the north, but when I was 9, I moved to Mexico City. That's where I started to I think develop myself creatively way more, since it's kind of like, for example, right now we're both in Berlin, and I always say that Mexico City is kind of like the Berlin of Mexico, because there's where you find a lot of more internationality, open-mindedness, creativity, a bunch of these kind of things, and that's how I ended up learning a little bit more about life and the way that I would like the world to be.
Okay. So what would the way you like the world to be, how would you like the world to be, or sort of what sort of things have you realized to for yourself where you say, hey, I would like the world to be a little bit more like this or a little bit less like that?
Right. I mean, perhaps this is an obvious example, or perhaps not, but living in a place like Mexico, you encounter a lot of, for example, homophobia or elitism, racism, etc., etc. It's a beautiful place, and I love my home, but nothing is perfect. And in Mexico City, that's where I started to get exposed to other aspects of life and other kind of people that I hadn't met before. And that's when I started realizing that the world is way bigger than, my home city, for example. Way bigger.
And what made you come to Berlin? So why did you choose Berlin as a place to move to? What was the thought behind that?
Well, it wasn't really planned, I guess.
It's never planned. Like, coming to Berlin is really never planned. I mean, I lived in Cologne before, and then I just knew I did not want to live in Cologne, and I had visited Berlin, and I was like, oh, I really like Berlin. But to be honest with you, I didn't know really anything about Berlin itself. I mean, I knew about Berlin and, the sort of the general history. So after World War II, but how the city was like modern day, I didn't know. But it was a good move. So So it was so you said it was sort of not it wasn't planned that you moved to Berlin.
No, it wasn't planned exactly. Like in high school, it was that there was this university fair, and a bunch of universities were at this fair naturally.
Hmm.
I always thought that I would stay in Mexico and have like my bachelor degree in a Mexican university.
Hmm.
But one of the universities at this fair was the one that I studied here in Berlin. And it turns out that because of this fair and this university being present at my high school, they have like this um, like understanding or deal that whoever is from this high school and moves on to this university can have like some sort of like scholarship slash discount.
Okay.
And this made it like a conversation in my family, like, okay, this is actually like plausible, you know?
Yeah. What did your family
And
think about the move?
they were the ones that convinced me.
Oh,
They
really?
were
Okay.
yeah, because I again like I was ready to study in Mexico.
Hmm.
They my parents were have been like a great help for me to be here and very supportive in that sense.
So
So
it wasn't
they
that you pissed them off and they were like, okay, go, go, go. So they're like, Berlin
no,
is great. Berlin is great. You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
yeah. Um yeah, that they were like, you know what? Like this is kind of like in the grand spectrum of things, this is kind of the same price as if you were to stay here, like with this um considerable scholarship.
Yeah.
Uh, we can call it that.
Okay.
So that's how I ended up getting convinced, you know, because I started like doing my own research a little bit more and more. And then something that really attracted me to Berlin was the fact that I could develop myself independently as a person and unfold, you
Hmm.
know, just like explore the city, just be like a little Boy Scout explorer all I want all day because in back home I don't get to do that so much because of like different reasons, one of them being like safety, for example.
Okay.
But yeah, like I ended up like thinking that Berlin was the option, and indeed it was. I love it here and I wanna stay for a longer time.
Okay. Is Mexico City rather dangerous since you said you didn't feel like you could really sort of explore or sort of have the adventures that you can have that helps you sort of grow as a person in Mexico City like you can have in Berlin?
I like sadly I would say so. And even then, like for example, I'm a man
Yeah.
and it's like way more dangerous for a woman, for example, because that happens a lot in Mexico City. Like it's unsafe. It's
Okay.
fun. It's fun. It's beautiful. A lot of culture and history,
Hmm.
but it's also like, you know, there's pros and cons.
Okay.
And something about here in Berlin is that I can, you know, feel more in control when I'm out at any time of the day or night,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah, I think that's the feedback that at least that's the feedback that I've given to also a lot of people about Berlin is that it's a big city, but it's really, and it took a while for me to become accustomed to that, but it's one of the few cities where you can walk through like a dark park and know that you're probably not going to get attacked, and that's also sort of part of this. I think there's like unspoken. I think as a Berlin society, there's like unspoken rules in order for us to be able to have this sort of freedom and fun that certain things can happen. Like, people can't start being attacked and so things don't happen because people are so more invested in protecting the feel of the city and the freedom that you have in the city to do certain things. So certain things don't happen. At least that's just my theory.
Yeah. No, I think I agree, for sure. Like it's I'm not saying that like nothing can happen, of course, like
Yeah, of
uh
course. Yeah.
It's just that there is a difference to like what can happen here and what can happen back home for me, for example.
Yeah. So what was the moment where you realized that art was your thing, that you wanted to be an artist?
That was like I didn't even, it's funny, maybe it wasn't even really like a decision, it was just an instinct because I've been the first thing that I did in art is drawing and illustration, and I've been doing that since I've been able to pick up pen and paper. You know, I've
Okay.
been this since I'm 2 years old,
Okay.
and there's like drawings that I did when I was this age, and they obviously look like terrible, like drunk scribbles.
Well, I should hope if you said like you like you were like illustrating like comic books at the age of 2, then I think I'd have a whole nother set of questions for you.
Uh, it was like very early, you know, I remember drawing like aliens and
Hmm.
monsters, like my own interpretations of aliens and monsters. I always, and I still do today, I always liked to draw creatures of the fictitious and paranormal,
Yeah, I mean,
whatever is happening.
I have another question for you, but I want to kind of go in on the monster thing because I've noticed like in your work, like your work is you have a lot of sort of these imaginary monster sort of things, and of course you can have anything. So, but why are monsters or sort of these type of creatures interesting for you?
Um, I guess maybe I have a bit of an hyperactive imagination in my head, and I just like all the time, you know, especially when I was a child,
Mm-hmm.
I imagined, you know, creatures running around me, like creatures following me when I'm in the car and I'm looking out the window. There's like this monsters and aliens and whatever you can imagine. They're like following me in the car and they're like with me in the classroom.
Okay.
Um, and
Isn't that a bit isn't that a bit distracting? Like
I
you're in a classroom and you're like sort of fantasizing about
yeah,
possible monsters.
like literally this is what happened. But yeah, like art and illustration was a great outlet for me for
Okay.
that stuff. And it's kind of like perhaps it's because I do have ADHD, so this is like an outlet that lets me focus and ground myself, and especially since I'm a little bit obsessive about details sometimes, and then I just want like the drawing to be exactly the way that I see it in my mind, and then I
Hmm.
just redo it and redo it again, and maybe that's like part of what makes me quote unquote an artist, because
Hmm.
we're artists in a way, I guess. But like me wanting to see the physical result of what I see in my head all the time is kind of what drove me as well, you know?
Okay. Yeah. When you start to work on something, sort of, how does your creative process like normally begin? Like, does it start with like a feeling? Do you have an image in your mind? Is it sort of you just put pen to paper and just see what comes? So, how does your creative process you typically begin?
Well, there are two ways it can go.
Hmm.
Um, First, like the more uh, free spirited way, I guess, it's that sometimes I just feel that I need to draw.
Hmm.
I, it's something that not only I enjoy, but it helps me like connect with myself and ground myself. So I
Hmm.
just like grab a pencil. I said pen and paper before, but honestly, I've always preferred pencil. I just grab my pencil, my notebook, one of my thousands of notebooks, and I draw anything. Like I start with a classic, you know, any kind of little creature, and then I do more and more. It's a lot of like scribbling and doodling.
Hmm.
And this is like the way that normally goes. But sometimes if I happen to have this idea that I think it's like a great idea,
Mm-hmm.
I immediately pull out like some any form of notebook, or even I write it down like a little sketch or a little guide of what I want to do, and then I prepare myself the next day
Okay.
to sit down and have like a drawing session, and that can last like an hour or two all evening. Um, and that would be like a more developed work.
Okay. Is that because since we worked together on creating the image for my last EP, is it difficult for you to create something based on sort of the idea or concept from someone else? Like, for example, so I came to you and said, "Hey, this is my musical concept. This is what it's about." Is that a difficult process? Because I find it, for example, for about there was a period almost 10 years ago where I created music for like companies, like for websites and for things like that. And that process, I stopped doing it because I just realized I that isn't really what I wanted to do because I just didn't enjoy it. Because it's very difficult when you go to someone and they say, "Oh, I want it to have sort of a tropical Ibiza feeling," and what I envision that to sound like and what other people envision that to sound like are very distinctively
Yeah.
different. And I found a solution to that, but I realized that my creative process does not really match the it doesn't match sort of the commercial of I want this and I need you to create that. It's sort of like you get what you get. So is that a difficult process for you? Like when you have someone saying, "Hey, can you create something for me that's about this?"
Well, for example, for the project that you and I did, the Karen album
Mm-hmm.
cover, uh, at the beginning, I it helped a lot that I liked the idea. I thought it was like such a fucking like crazy random, but in a good way,
Yeah.
kind of concept. And then it came like what normally happens in this situation. Like, okay, this is not exactly what I would have done if you had asked me to do anything at all. You
Mm-hmm.
know, what bridge can I build to do something that both helps out the person that I'm helping and makes me feel like I'm having fun and I'm feeling fulfilled.
Yeah.
So, for example, like in the cover art of the Karen album, I first sent you like the idea of the King Kong Karen, which is like the
Mm-hmm.
final concept,
Yeah.
was not the only idea that I had. I sent you some sketches of like different versions of this Karen woman doing different evil things or different like visual metaphorical actions that tell you that she is like a bad person,
Yeah.
right? Um, and these were things that I knew would make me feel like, I would like to draw this
Yeah.
because perhaps not all the iterations of Karen that you would choose are the ones that I would choose.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
part of my job, I guess, is to find something that works for both of us,
Yeah.
then when I find something that not only you like, but also that I can feel like I want to do, then I feel it's in both of our best interest because then I can really do something great.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Um, so you since you've been doing artwork such a long time, you've lived, you come from Mexico, you live now in Berlin. How do you feel? Do you feel that your style or that your art has changed based upon being in a different surrounding, as opposed to if you were in Mexico creating art and now being in Berlin? Do you feel like the sort of surroundings and everything around you has had an influence on what you create?
Um, Now that you asked that, it's kind of interesting. I didn't realize this before, but I'm thinking like in Mexico City, I used to have this artist identity struggle
Mm-hmm.
because there was like again, Mexico City is kind of the Berlin of Mexico. So there was a fair deal of independent illustrators and artists of multiple media out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up to them a lot. I saw that they had a very, very grounded style for each of them had their own grounded style.
Okay.
And I remember like struggling a lot about this because I normally drew any kind of style is what I
Yeah.
felt it, and it made me feel like this like imposter syndrome thingy where I'm like, damn it, if I don't have a style, then what kind of artist am I? Am I even an artist?
Mm-hmm.
And then here in Berlin, you see like so much more variety in the arts, in the media, in the concepts, in what people are trying to say. Sometimes people are trying to speak about, some sort of political activism, and then some other people are literally just doing things because they can, like ridiculous things, but still it's art,
Yeah.
and like kind of opened my eyes to like, okay, like whatever it is that I feel in my deepest self that I want to do, then that is my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't need always to fill in this like block, or this my style, if you can call it that, can always change and can always evolve.
Yeah.
And that is not something that should stop me, but rather that should move me more forward,
Yeah, I think a big part of it is that I think at any time when you make a decision that this is something artistic is what you want to do, is that you, of course, look at people's style. And I think there's also part of the learning process is that you look at other people's styles. Maybe you see elements that or you don't use like the entire style, but until you start trying to maybe recreate that style for yourself, then you start to notice which elements of that particular style you actually like, which parts actually speak to you, and which part of the style doesn't. So, and I think that's just a big part of the process. So, but I can also understand this sort of imposter feeling where you're thinking at the beginning, sort of, okay, now I just feel like I'm just recreating what others have already done, and I need to find sort of my own voice.
Exactly. I feel that happened to me a little bit in that like era in Mexico City, especially like before I left Berlin. Like I was very involved in social media a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to see a lot of the constant work that these artists that I still look up to, like they pump out every single week, and I'm like trying to recreate that. I'm trying to do my own thing, but
Mm-hmm.
it just it's something that doesn't feel like me, at least right now. And then when I moved here and I saw all of this variety, and I started to like, instead of following the social media trend, just like draw for the sake of drawing and doing like gigs for different people, that's when I really started to enjoy and find more of what I want to do.
Yeah, I always find it a little strange. It wasn't until there was an artist friend of mine, and he was always creating just stuff, just small things. Either he was sketching in his book, or he had 9 million things going on at the same time. And I always was impressed because when it comes to music, like I just finished this EP, and I have like a couple other songs I want to do, but like I need a break. Like I have to like step away from it until either something externally inspires me or I come across an idea, but like I can't just continue to produce music just because like I need to produce music. So I always find it I always find it a little strange when people are you look at certain people and they're just continually just they're just like prolific in terms of just like so much is they're doing so much, and I just think like where are they getting that from? And
Where
also
do they
the
get this energy?
yeah, I'm like, where are you getting all this? First of all, where are you getting the energy? But then what I also notice is I don't, many times people who are really prolific in what they do, I don't see the development in there. And I don't see an arc of development. Like I see they're producing, they're making more things, but it's a lot of the same. And I don't know if maybe
Right.
having at least music in music it is, but having this sort of break for me is also allowing me to process what I've done and maybe what I will do in the future, you know?
Yeah, totally. Like this little breaks help you a lot to digest this era that you just had and like maybe transcend into a new form of style,
Exactly.
art, whatever, even like transition into from one media to another.
Yeah.
Because I got like the way that you're describing this, like they are so prolific, yes, but then it's kind of almost like they're stuck in this style. And that's
Exactly.
a lot of what for example, a lot of what I saw in social media back then. And I remember I wanted this, I admired it because I didn't feel so prolific, again, as you
Hmm.
call it myself. So I was like, damn, I really need to step my game up. I gotta like start pumping out content every week like that and like
Yeah.
really have like a style locked down. But maybe it works for other people, but I that's how I realized here that that's not what works for me. Like I like to have like my bursts of explosive energy and imagination, and then
Yeah.
I take a step back and I'm like, okay, maybe let's try something else.
Do you have any like people right now who sort of inspire or sort of influence sort of what you do or people who are just not necessarily illustrators but artists, any artists in general?
Hmm. Perhaps not somebody in a specific, but what I really love about Berlin is that I can see independent artists all the time
Hmm.
doing their thing. I really love, for example, something that is, I don't know what's the way to call it, maybe traditional of
Hmm.
Berlin is these like art markets
Hmm.
where, I mean, I'm sure it happens on other places, but whatever. Like
Yeah, but
these
they're
art
really big. They're a
markets,
lot in Berlin. Yeah.
yeah. There's like tattoo artists, illustrators, sometimes DJs, and they're just trying to like get their stuff seen out there, not necessarily like go famous or whatever, but like they wanna be heard, they wanna be seen, and they are doing it on their own. uh they are the ones that are putting themselves out there.
Yeah.
They are counting on themselves to do it, and
Hmm.
I admire that a lot. Like they have different styles, different concepts, artworks, and all of that is amazing. But what I really admire is how it's this spirit
Hmm.
of like the world is mine,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna go get it.
Yeah.
That's what inspires me. Every
Is
time I see it outside.
is there like a piece or can you think of or maybe if there is one, has there been like a piece of art or something that you've seen that sort of changed how you approach your work or sort of like gave you permission to take that sort of that next step into a direction that you weren't so sure about going in?
Yeah, for example, now I'm starting to remember that I graduated from my bachelor's a year ago,
Hmm.
and like about a year and a half ago was my internship semester.
Okay.
And I did it at this screen printing workshop in Berlin called Many Tentacles. It's
Hmm.
run by Maria and Dylan.
Hmm.
And this two people like were a very big inspiration for me because own they have their own shop where they both put up their original artworks.
Hmm.
They sell them, and this is how they make a living, like that's kind of that's the dream,
Yeah.
it's the artist's dream made true. And I was able to work under them like in an internship, and they are the ones that always told me, no, yeah, you can start slow and then build it up and do your own thing, be independent. Again, going back to the what I was saying of like this spirit of the world is yours and go get it.
Mm-hmm.
They really embodied that at times, and I love that a lot. So I would recommend anybody that can, that
Mm-hmm.
has the opportunity to go to many tentacles in Berlin and check it out because they have, you know, this art that is like truly from their heart. And
What
I
part
think
of Berlin is it in? Which neighborhood?
it's in Hackische Markt, which
Oh,
is
okay.
in
So yeah, Mitte.
the
Okay.
Mitte
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, when you create something, like this is something I always stop myself from doing. Like if I finish a song and I release it, I try not to go back to it. But what I end up doing is sometimes like it's a lot of times I may not listen to one of my old releases for like a years, and then I'll listen to it and then I'll like, oh, I'll do you go back to revisit your work? I mean, I think about going back and revisiting like older things I've done, but then I stop myself from doing it because I'm like, no, it is what it is. It's done. Let's move forward.
I honestly, I think I'm the same. Like I once I'm in the process and I'm in that moment, I can in it like for a long time and like
Hmm.
shape it and repolish it and rethink it and redo it and like a lot of redesigning. But
Hmm.
once I decide that it's done, then it's really hard for me to revisit it because at that point I'm just like looking forward to the next thing or the next idea. And
Yeah.
it is hard for me to like try to go back to something that I know I decided it's done,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Because I noticed when we were collaborating that you have a lot of like your sketchbook, your stuff like that. So how does like technology mix into what you create? I mean, as an illustrator, of course, there's tons of tools, but how much of your process is sort of hand, like pen or pencil on paper, and how when does it get to the point where it starts to involve more sort of a technology and is part of the creative process.
Well, I do think that I'm more active in the analog side of it,
Hmm.
but I usually I use for example, I use Photoshop to do more graphic design stuff that is not necessarily illustration, but it's still like very visually oriented.
Hmm.
Sometimes there are types of things that I do only for analog media, and there's other things that I do only for digital media. For example, like cover art
Hmm.
for albums and like musical merch and stuff like this. I like to keep it on the digital thing
Hmm.
because I feel that's where more of graphic design can come in, which is more of what I feel that works with a lot of people, like a
Yeah.
lot of people that are looking to have their own uh like music cover art, for example.
Hmm.
It can happen that for somebody says, "Hey, I would like have this specific analog drawing, have it as an album cover." Um, but normally what I do is that I keep it analog for, my own personal things and projects
Hmm.
and uh going back to, for example, the monsters and aliens and like my fictitious creatures, I like to keep that analog because again, I like to like obsess with the little details and go back to it and reshape it, stay in
Hmm.
it for a long time, and I do that with pencil much more naturally than I do it with digital.
Yeah. It's funny because when Karen came out, and so I sent it, of course, to so like did some promotion and sent it to friends and stuff, and I remember some of them looking at the album cover and they were like, "So who did the album cover?" And I told them a little bit about you and about sort of the process. And it was
Oh,
really there was the reaction was really mixed and strange because it's the only album cover that I've had that's like that. There's if you look across the board at any of all my other album covers, they're usually very sort of graphic and very graphic design, sort of like very digital looking or something like that, or a photo image. And so it was interesting for them because many of them had a lot of questions as to why an illustration like that. And so I
wow.
explained to, well, yeah, it was just really interesting because I was like, well, there's a lot going on, and I think in a lot of the songs a lot's going on, and the image sort of captures that. So but I was really surprised at um, how people were really sort of shocked at this total change in terms of the imagery that I sought out for that. So when people sort of look at your work and stuff like that, how do you deal sort of like with either criticism or feedback from people when the people either don't understand something that you've done or something like that?
Um, okay, so you mean like what's my reaction to criticism?
Yeah,
Kind
like for me, when someone listens, and I know that I think I don't know if it's unique, but it's just how I am. I create music really for myself, to be honest with you, as selfish as that sounds. So I don't create with an audience in mind. I create what comes out, and then I start to put together the different sort of tracks and what I want to do, and then I sort of a lot of times develop a vision from there, or start off with a concept, but the concept is there, but I still may not have an idea about how the songs are going to sound or what I want them to feel like. So a lot of times I think, especially if you listen to some of my work, which can be sometimes for some people abstract, and for me, I see it as normal. So people
yeah.
I listen I listen to feedback from like friends who I also do music who I really respect. Like I have a friend of mine, so Future Films. I respect his work a lot. I've known him also 30 years. So he also understands my creative process. So I'm open to feedback from him because he also understands my my process and
You
he
come
understands
from.
me musically. So when he gives feedback,
Yeah.
he's also giving feedback in the context of his knowledge of my process. So when people have maybe a criticism or feedback, how do you sort of take that on, or do you take it on, or how do you deal with that?
Well, normally I guess I appreciate the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
I try to keep like the criticism that is gonna potentially change the artwork or the nature of the artwork. Like I try to listen to myself a
Mm-hmm.
lot. And a lot of when I listen to feedback is like, okay, then I run it back with myself and see if I agree with this feedback, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I do also have like certain friends that are very much artists and they know me, so they know where I'm coming from, they know where
Mm-hmm.
my art's coming from. Uh, that's where I feel the most when my art is susceptible to change because
Mm-hmm.
I that they can help me uh materialize my vision even further than I thought I could do it on by myself,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which is like it's really nice to have like good friends like that, I guess. But
Yeah.
sometimes there can be people that do give me certain feedback that, for example, directions me to like a more popular mainstream thing,
Yeah.
which is just not me.
Yeah,
So
that's the one thing that
what
irritates
I
me.
have to
It
say,
irritates
like,
yeah, that irritates me when people try to tell you like if you do this you'll be more commercial or you'll be more, it's like that's not even my goal.
exactly, because like that's why I run these like feedback back with me and see, okay, they're giving me this feedback. It comes from like a nice place, like
Yeah.
they're trying to be supportive, but is this what I want? No,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, like art is works best and comes more naturally when it's done for the self
Of
by the
course.
self,
Yeah.
you know? So if you start listening to these other goals that are outside of your own then starts to like crumble, you know?
Yeah. So what are your goals, or what does I guess success as an artist, what does that look like for you?
Well, funny enough, I was thinking about that today. I've been thinking,
You're like looking like, okay, how do I get my money in my bank account?
you know, I was thinking about that today. I've been thinking about it a lot recently, and I realized that maybe, it's not that I have to have this like artist title in order to be an artist, the same
Yeah.
way that I don't know, maybe somebody that studies IT but has a passion for DJing
Mm-hmm.
doesn't need to have like a DJ title to do DJing. It's
Of course.
an artist is more of an attitude and a habit than a profession.
Mm-hmm.
So uh I am trying to like my goal would be to find something that does make me feel accomplished and
Mm-hmm.
thus it is aligned some way with my creative outlet necessity, but at the same time, it gives me space to do my own personal things,
Yeah.
and to do gigs like this, for example, of things that like challenge me to think outside of my own ideas and still create and manufacture something new for somebody else. 'Cause
When
that's what I seek, you know?
yeah, when you show someone your work, or someone sort of has a chance to maybe look at several of the things that you've illustrated, what you've created, is there sort of a something that you hope that people take away in general once they experience or have a chance to actually see your work? Is there something that you hoped, a message or a feeling that you hope that people really receive from the actual work itself?
Um, in all honesty, I guess not really. I hope that they might think no, no. I
I mean, it may not be. I mean, I think if I were to ask myself the same question, I don't. It would be difficult to answer what I hope they take away. I mean, I hope they take away something, but what specifically it is, I can't really say.
I guess maybe this is like too cheesy, but I guess they can feel like some sort of freedom,
Mm,
like an understanding that if I can do this, they can do whatever they want, because at the end of the day, what I'm doing is like just this like silly fictitious creatures that don't exist. So how can this work? But if I can make it work, then they should know that life and the world is theirs as well.
yeah.
And maybe it's not a specific message, but more as just simple inspiration in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that through the inspiration, it's also like maybe teaching people, hoping that people give themselves permission to also to dive into their imagination and to create or to live life the way they feel that they need to. And I think some people don't give themselves that permission to be creative or to take those steps or to do certain things that they may want to really do. And sometimes by looking at stuff like illustrations and stuff like the art that you create, that because it's such so since it comes from the fantasy and its realm, that it gives them also maybe the inspiration to also allow themselves to be imaginative and also fantasize about various things.
Yeah. Like just inspiration and like perhaps if there has to be a message, the like be creative.
Yeah.
Be as creative as humanly possible because it's gonna work out in your favor one way or another, regardless of which area, profession, whatever part of life you live in, um, creativeness is like a human necessity. So
Yeah.
use it to your favor.
Good. Also, on that point, I think that is actually a great point to sort of wrap it up. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. It's been a lovely conversation,
Of
Mr.
course, I had a
Daniel.
lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate it, and I'm hoping that people will really get a chance to search you out, look at your work, and also maybe take some of your advice, especially the part about allowing themselves to be creative and imaginative, because I think we could probably use a lot more of that in the world right now.
Yeah.
Cool.
I um I would like to see more of that as well. So hopefully yeah, they took something out of this.
Hopefully. Cool. Thank you very much.